Hey Ethan, it's Mrs. Campbell. Sorry that I'm just now getting this to you. It's been a day. Whew. So class was sort of abbreviated today. We spent a little bit of time in review, not much, but a little bit of time, and I kind of backtracked a little bit and talked about the Declaration of Independence. There was a question or two on the quiz for Chapter 6 that I thought readdressing the Declaration of Independence might be helpful. I don't know if it helped, but anyway, I didn't spend much time talking about the Declaration of Independence when we covered that, I guess, in Chapter 5 because of the PSAT and just stuff. So it was a weird few weeks, but so I'm going to send you in Google Classroom a link to the PowerPoint that we used today for review. Part of it is about the Declaration of Independence. We also read a copy of the Declaration of Independence. We read the whole text in class today and made some notes on certain parts of the Declaration of Independence that I felt were important for you guys to be aware of. One of the things that we practice in AP, as you know, is reading primary sources, and there isn't a better primary source to read than the Declaration of Independence. So we did that in class. I'm going to email you, or I'm going to include in Google Classroom a copy of the Declaration of Independence, and I would like for you to read it through. And I'm going to make a copy. I have a copy here for you, a hard copy, paper copy, and I'm going to underline and scribble in the margin some of the things that we talked about in class so that you have a copy of it as well. And then excuse me, when I see you again, I'll kind of go over that with you. But if you open up the PowerPoint that I attached on today's lesson, I'll kind of walk through with you what we talked about. There is a link that I'm going to include underneath my signature. One of the links is this video. The other link is going to be a video to a very short 2-minute clip of a presentation by one of the curators at the the National Archives in Washington, D.C., where they keep the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and a whole bunch of other stuff. So, and I'll explain that in a minute. But the first picture that you'll see in the PowerPoint slide is a picture of Independence Hall. And we talked about, if you'll open, I don't know if you can do this on a split screen where you're watching my video and looking at the PowerPoint on your computer, but you can see from the picture that the city of Philadelphia has built up around Independence Hall. They've left it intact. That building, that very famous building, was actually the Pennsylvania State Legislature. That's where they met. And then at the Second Continental Congress, when they came back to talk about Lexington and Concord and some of the conflict that was erupting all over New England, they effectively booted out the Pennsylvania State Legislature, who then met on the second floor of that building, and the Continental Congress, the Second Continental Congress, met in the bottom floor in that very famous room where we watched the John Adams miniseries, that kind of green sage room. And right within that complex, or the long green lawn area where you see Independence Hall, just a couple of blocks off to the left is where Benjamin Franklin's house was, and so he probably took a carriage into the Congress every day. And then there's a building, there are several buildings to the right of Independence Hall that are part of the museum complex. One of them holds the Liberty Bell. The other one is a sort of a glass or steel structure over the foundation of where the president's mansion was. So during George Washington's presidency, he lived in the president's mansion in Philadelphia because the White House, obviously, or the Washington, D.C. wasn't built yet. So, sorry, I had to make sure that the clock was going, or that the record button was on. And then if you were to walk forward from Independence Hall, maybe a block, and then take a left and head that direction, you would bump into the apartment or the row house that Thomas Jefferson rented. He rented a second floor parlor and bedroom area from somebody who owned a house downtown Philadelphia. And so he wrote the Declaration of Independence in his parlor. There is a picture of me in front of the parlor going, ah! If you ever get a chance to go to Philadelphia, you can. It's actually a museum. That whole building is a museum. And so you can go in. When we happened to be there, there was nobody else there. And so we walked upstairs and we stood in front of the glass or the plexiglass plane and looked into the room where Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin and John Adams and others met while they were putting together the Declaration of Independence. Excuse me. It was pretty cool, I must say. We were talking about, I said, that's the room where it happened. And of course, we break out into Hamilton again. Different story, same idea. It was really cool to be standing there, peering into the room where Thomas Jefferson spent who knows how many hours putting together the Declaration of Independence. So the next picture is just a picture of the National Archives, where the Declaration of Independence is kept today. The following picture is inside the room of the National Archives where the Declaration of Independence is stored or kept on view for the public. And there are also the Constitution are the ones in the middle, and then over to the right, there's 2 or 3 people peering down is the Bill of Rights. So hopefully if you guys get to go to Washington, D.C. in the spring, you will be able to get to see that firsthand. There's a painting of Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, and John Adams kind of going through, looking over the Declaration of Independence. I don't know if you remember when we watched that John Adams series, there was a scene where the 3 of those men were in Thomas Jefferson's parlor, and Adams and Franklin were reviewing the Declaration for the first time, and they were astonished by it. They made some small critiques of it. I believe Benjamin Franklin told Thomas Jefferson to take out the word, "We hold these truths to be sacred and undeniable." He says, I think that smacks of the pulpit. I think we need to change that word. And they ended up with, "We hold these truths to be self-evident rather than sacred and undeniable." So there were some changes made, and that picture depicts that scene, probably where they got the idea for the movie as well. Something else about that. Oh, do you remember when we watched that scene in the movie that another one of Benjamin Franklin's criticisms of Thomas Jefferson's original draft of the Declaration was that it talked about the evils of slavery, and Benjamin Franklin warned him that now was not the time to fight over slavery, that first we needed to unite the 13 colonies to declare independence, and that we'll tackle slavery later. Sort of a unspoken or not unspoken, a spoken spoken statement of the obvious that if we don't unite behind the cause of independence, there will be no dealing with slavery down the road. So in a spirit of unity, they set that discussion aside for the time being, and of course ultimately was decided with the Civil War. And then there's a copy of the Declaration of Independence. This is a photograph of it. You can tell from the picture the Declaration of Independence is very faded. I've seen it, I think, 3 times in person, and really other than the very center of the document, there are a few words you can make out. You can sort of read out the title, and then the big J in John Hancock's signature is evident because it's so large and it almost looks like he pressed down when he wrote it. It's pretty much unreadable, and that's unfortunate. It wasn't taken very good care of. It was stored in various places over the 200 plus years. Thomas Jefferson kept it at his house for a while. It was rolled up and kept in some sort of case in the Naval Department storage shed or storage closet or something. Eventually, after the Smithsonian museums began to open, the Declaration of Independence was sent to them, where they put it on display and allowed people to take pictures of it with flash photography and a whole bunch of stuff. And so it's spent, so to speak. So I think about 2000, they put it into another case, but if I remember correctly, they set the parchment against a piece of glass, which was probably not the smartest thing to do. And then when the most recent casing was fitted in the most recent casing, they weren't sure if it would even come apart from the glass, but it did. And so it's in pretty bad shape as far as being legible, but the paper is still intact, the parchment is still intact. And so the case that it's in now is temperature controlled, climate controlled, humidity controlled, bulletproof, all of those things to maintain it as long as possible. You'll notice in the bottom left-hand corner of the picture, there is a handprint. And I made the kids look at it from a distance to see. I didn't even tell them what they were looking for. I just said, do you see something strange? And when I pointed it out, they're like, oh yeah, there's a handprint. And so the Smithsonian doesn't have any idea how it got there. They don't know if that's part of the original document that somebody leaned down to sign and it absorbed maybe oil from a riding glove, or if the person had ink on their hands when they put their handprint down. They don't really know. And so the National Archives is trying to find as old pictures as they possibly can to compare it with the document today to find out if maybe it happened later when it was being transferred from one container to the other. They just don't know. So anyway, so make sure that you read through the Declaration of Independence. You don't necessarily need to do that prior to taking the quiz, but definitely read it on your own sometime between now and Monday. And then the next slide is just another review of the northern New England colonies, the middle colonies or states, and the southern states. I felt like there's a question on the quiz that refers to a region, and I wanted to make sure that you remembered which was which. So the New England states are Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Connecticut. The middle colonies are New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. And then the southern colonies include Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. Sometimes Maryland and Virginia are also referred to as the Chesapeake colonies because they're by the Chesapeake Bay. They are also included as part of the southern states, and that's largely because of the slave culture that existed there and the products that they grew on their plantations, cotton, tobacco, obviously. And so they're considered part of the southern colonies or southern states ultimately. And then the very last slide you can keep open on your computer when you take the quiz. It is a picture of the first image on your quiz, and the copies didn't turn out very well, and so it's kind of hard to read some of the text in it. So if you want to leave that slide up don't try to not look at the rest of the PowerPoint, but you can leave that slide open with that last image of some Indians hanging some people. You'll see it. You can leave that open to look at, to reference on your first question. I think it might be the first couple of questions on the quiz. You can reference that because it's a better view of it. So, and then we took the quiz. Oh, actually, make sure you watch the video, the 2-minute video of the curator that talks about the Declaration of Independence. Again, you don't necessarily need to watch that before you take the quiz, but make sure you do watch that. We took the quiz. I think that's all we did today. It was a pretty chill day. It's been kind of chill around here. It feels like there's a lot of people gone. The basketball players are back, of course. But anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to try to upload this video to my YouTube channel so I can copy the link and send it to you. So stay tuned for more further instructions for Monday. We're actually doing a Harkness discussion on Monday. And I don't know how to get the reading material to you because I made copies from a textbook, another book that I have. I may just mail them to you. There's no rush on it. You won't be here for the Harkness discussion, but I do want you to read the article and probably just make some observations for me. But stay tuned for that, okay? Bye.